But
yeah, I mean, we're all using the word document and documentation, but I'm not really clear what you're defining as document and documentation, because in a sense the boundaries are really quite porous and meaningless. So I think that the process of just producing the OMSK book, if you can call that a document itself, was, I thought, a performative process. It was one which was full of tension and uncertainty, very much like the events themselves. And I think it's a bit of paper which is in flux. It's not complete in many ways, and it doesn't work in some ways as well. And I think that's a lot to do with what OMSK is about. So I think, not to be pedantic, we shouldn't really be playing around with the distinctions between what's a document and what's performance, because to be honest, I mean, in this day and age, I think we're talking about the heterodoxy of practice and the interrelationships. So I don't think that's a very fruitful area to go into, to check out.
I think the Peggy feeling comment's really relative. No, but I just think it's relative because I think that's where that's what holds performance different from any other medium.
I think that, so I'd just like to put in, I think that for me, documentation, and especially the kind of stuff that OMSK are doing with this book, books, videos of work, for me as a performance artist, is essential. If I want to reach a wider audience, if I want people to know what I've done, if I want to get funding, if I want to get programmed,
I mean, I
can't survive without it.
There's an economic argument, I think, and I would like to bring up that economic argument, that if you don't document it, that you're never actually going to make it into a practice which is going to pay your
I don't think it's necessarily about, it's not about money, it's about continuing and facilitating it, and facilitating artists as well. Yeah, but it's about facilitating artists as well. Like with the OMSK book, they're putting artists out there and kind of saying, oh, look at these artists and what they've been doing, look what OMSK does, and people might not know about that, and that's great. And there's places like the Live Art Development Agency, the British Library, that are starting to store work, starting to store things, objects, documentation, which is allowing artists to be seen and experienced, which is great, and I think it's vital.
You disagree?
No, I disagree with what you said about the money. I don't think you should have brought it out.
You think I shouldn't have mentioned it?
No, I don't think so, because I think there's other economies involved, and I don't know OMSK that well, but I'm sure the main economy of OMSK, people would say, would be more about spirit rather than...
So can we look around here, around this tent now? I'm sure there's some official document. Who's officially documenting this now? Put up your hand. Right.
Well,
what? Right. Okay. So who isn't officially documenting this? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So that was what I was trying to explain, was that even if you, if you don't document your work but choose to do it in places where people are going to be documenting, it is likely that you will have a document of your work, whatever happens. And actually, maybe sometimes people's work could be, I'm not saying this applies to myself or anything, because I'm totally the other way. I document everything I do, blah, blah, blah. But if you were a person who, for example, you chose to do something somewhere and it was a spontaneous gesture and you didn't get anybody to document
it. Probably on CCTV.
But it's probably on CCTV. It's likely that someone's documenting it, either in their head or, someone's documenting it. Because that's the nature of our society at the moment, isn't it, surely?
Should be things that actually, by their nature, should not be documented. Things that, could you as an artist, anyone on the table might want to say they want to perform something, and please do not document, do not record this.
Yeah.
Is that valid?
I've done a lot of work with students where what we do is I take them out and we do performances in places like Liverpool Street train station, where you're not allowed to document it, and if you actually document it, it actually hinders what you're trying to do. So we go out and we do things without any cameras, and we come back and talk about it and talk about them in the future.
Literature's for me a really big inspiration, and if that wasn't there, which is a kind of documentation of itself, of thoughts and ideas, and if that wasn't there, I'd be a bit lost.
Anybody else?
I just want to make a general point about this conversation becoming very precious, because I don't know how well traveled you lot are, but for me, live art in Bangladesh and Guatemala City is very different to what you guys are talking about. There's a fucking world beyond Dover. No, hang on. bunch of Ponzi bullshit you guys are talking about. Because, I mean, what fucking live art do you mean? What fucking archiving? Have you been to Bangladesh lately? Have you been to Guatemala? Have you gone to Honduras?
I'm talking about
Yeah, but I'm saying the way you guys are talking in absolute terms, this is fucking live art, that's archiving. What a pile of crap. Listen, for me, what's interesting here is in some societies, sometimes live art and this outsider culture is a way of putting very, oppressed voices up there, and often it's a way of actually documenting and marking very significant processes going on in society, which mainstream culture doesn't do. So in Bangladesh, the fact that a student project can get one line on a newspaper is a huge thing, because most of the student kind of work on community development and all that stuff is totally invisible. So sometimes when somebody does an art project, which is a bit like Banksy, and by accident gets into the newspaper, has a massive effect. And in these societies, there's a huge digital divide. There's also a big Anglo divide, because most of you guys, know the world from the fucking stuff in English. Well, in some parts of the world, whether in the Arabic world or in the Sanskrit world, they can't access this stuff. So archiving is absolutely fundamental. So pile of crap you lot are talking. I feel like you're a fucking bunch of racists. And
Why doesn't
I'm
someone-
sitting here and hearing these definitions of archive and live art. What a fucking bunch of bollocks. So I want some responses, man. Come on.
What a bunch of bollocks. Give him a round of applause.
Not that I want to take the heat away from that. But because this is OMSK and because this is a democracy, I just want to announce that there is a performance about to begin next door. So if you want to stay and see if there's going to be a fight or something, because I know I am, or you can go next door and watch the performance by Bill Aitchison, which is happening now. Thank you.
Okay, there's a little public announcement. Let's not let it puncture the passion here, because Aladdin's a little bit upset about. Yeah.
The most important thing is the dissemination, it's a distribution, it's a broadcast of that archive, of that documentation. Who's going to see it? Who decides actually what is broadcast and what is actually disseminated around the world? Who controls the broadcasters? Hopefully we're getting some of that with the internet, and who's going to see what website you're on? But it's
documentation itself is a very active process. It can be provocation itself, the very fact that there's a trace of something. So I think we need to recognize, it's not about document you go to the British Library. A lot of it is actually about the fact that, it's like OMSK book is an artifact, and I think it's in a sense more powerful than their performances and their events, even their history, because a wider range of people can access it. And I think the whole issue about archiving and documentation partly is to do with the fact that other people need to be into that discourse. And I think my difficulty here is that it seems the discourse stops at Dover.
is it?
Well, what about this? No, but people are talking about YouTube, and they're talking about on the internet, searching on the internet.
If you have a sensory disability, if you don't have any access to the net, let's not talk crap. I mean, for God's sake, YouTube.
Sorry, what's wrong with YouTube?
I think YouTube is fantastic, but I think you need to recognize that 90% of the world doesn't access YouTube. And I think when you're talking about live art, 90% of live art isn't known. And I think when you're talking about your eschatology and your typologies, 99% of it isn't even in this room.
But the question is, do people care about those 90%, 99% of people?
What I was going to say was, I was going to say that this might sound very stupid now, but I'm just saying that doesn't OMSK, going back to OMSK, sort of, doesn't OMSK make things accessible for people who might be scared of going to live art in
Because it's
galleries?
more of a nightclub.
Because it's more of a nightclub, yeah. I mean, I know that's how I felt about it when I first stepped inside an OMSK 10 years ago, 12 years ago or something, no, 10 years ago. I thought, I don't like going to nightclubs actually, but this is a nightclub that I like because, there's these films being shown with this compare and it makes it exciting to me.
Okay. Duncan, what have you been listening to this?
I listened to a bit of the last. Yeah.
Do you agree with Aladdin that it's a load of bollocks?
What
has been said? No. Anyway, I'm just unfairly paraphrasing him, but that's the nature of things.
I think, from what people have just said, there's a whole tradition of artists who believe themselves to have some kind of mystical, privileged vision of the world, and they really don't like getting involved in trade.
Right.
Or dirtying their hands with any kind of trade, because it kind of, it goes back to sort of romanticism and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So artists run, there's a lot of artists who don't want to sell tickets and be on the door and do publicity and advertising and stuff that isn't art, because they see that as some kind of, lower form of activity.
Okay.
So you've got to get over that.
Get over it. Okay.